Courageous, revolutionary, fearless. Born Elizabeth Jane Cochran on May 5, 1864, Nellie Bly was able to make a great impact on America because she changed American journalism styles, and she brought awareness to the harsh and often unnecessary treatment of mental patients by exploring asylums in the 1880s. As a student, she was a remarkable writer. After her father died and her mother remarried, she realized she had no one to depend on but herself. Her family moved to Pittsburgh, and after 5 years of searching, she landed a job at local newspaper, the Pittsburgh Dispatch, after impressing the editor with her bluntness. There, she took up the pen name Nellie Bly, the title of a popular song written by Stephen Collins Foster 35 years earlier. She continued on to write a long series of alarming articles about the hard lives of working women among her era, until one day she didn't report to the Dispatch offices, but instead left a note saying she was headed for New York City. Following the Panic of 1884, many Americans became impoverished, including Nellie. She was nearly broke heading to the Pulitzer Building, headquarters to Admiral newspaper The New York World, the publication that was later known for prompting the rise of yellow journalism. By persistently waiting to be seen, Nellie struck the attention of Colonel Cockrell, the newspaper's editor, who, to her surprise, appointed her to her first assignment. She would have to investigate the purported abuses at New York's Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island by faking insanity to get admitted, an idea from New York World publisher himself, Joseph Pulitzer. It was a serious demand for a lady just trying out for a job, but Bly liked the risks. Americans in this age did not accept the mentally ill, and many women were admitted just because they were foreign or poor. Previous reports stated that the asylum on Blackwell's Island was clean and sanitary, but Nellie feared this was not the case. She registered as Nellie Brown at matron Irene Stennard's temporary home for females, where she was sent to be examined at Bellevue Hospital after refusing to sleep and complaining of a headache that made her forget things. The doctors called her story the most peculiar case that's ever come to the hospital. After the second night there, the doctor pronounced her positively demented, and she was taken by boat to Blackwell's Island across the East River. Once she entered the asylum, she was horrified, writing, "The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap." While she was there, she was sure to write down every detail and elaborate on every sensation because she was to publish a series of columns for the New York World. She wrote about the dirty ferry that carried her to the asylum, the female foreigners who were declared insane just because they could not be understood, the freezing cold baths and inadequate amount and poor quality food. She wrote, "What, accepting torture, would produce insanity quicker than this treatment? Here is a class of women sent to be cured. I would like the expert physicians who are condemning me for my action, which has proven their ability, to take a perfectly sane and healthy woman, shut her up and make her sit from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on straight back benches. Do not allow her to talk or move during these hours. Give her no reading and let her know nothing of the world or its doings. Give her bad food and harsh treatment, and see how long it will take to make her insane. 2 months would make her a mental and physical wreck." October 4th, 1887, Pulitzer, as promised, sent the New York World's cartoonist Walt McDougall with attorney Peter A. Hendricks to obtain Nellie's release from the asylum 10 days after she had first checked in. After her release, Nellie wrote, "I began to have a smaller regard for the ability of doctors than I ever had before. I felt sure now that no doctor could tell whether people were insane or not." McDougall planned to illustrate for Bly's upcoming expose. Years later, he recalled waiting in a courtyard and almost getting stripped by a raging crowd of female maniacs, idiots, and plain bugs. The way the mob rushed me, one would have thought I was the first train out after a subway holdup. Pulitzer admired how Bly exposed the asylum's awful conditions and said she is well educated and has a great future before her, after giving her a permanent job at the World. The first of her 2 articles appeared on October 9, 1887, titled simply, "Behind Asylum Bars," in which she wrote, "Could I pass a week in the insane asylum on Blackwell's Island? I said I could and I would. And I did." 2 weeks following the story's appearance, Assistant District Attorney Vernon Paris led a grand jury to investigate the conditions at Blackwell's Island Asylum, and Bly accepted an invitation to join them. Following a thorough inspection, they recommended more money and better food for the insane, to reduce overcrowding, to no longer lock ward doors which caused fire hazards, and to hire more women doctors to care for women patients. Bly wrote in the last paragraph of her book, "On the strength of my story, the Committee of Appropriations provided $1 million more than ever before for the benefit of the insane, after the authorities had approved a 57% increase of appropriations to improve asylum conditions." 2 months after her exposé, Bly's series was reprinted as a book named 10 Days in a Madhouse. She wrote about her motives to report about the asylum. She stated, "I always had a desire to know asylum life more thoroughly, a desire to be convinced that the most helpless of God's creatures, the insane, were cared for kindly and properly." The grand jury then made sure that only the seriously mentally ill were admitted into asylums, provoked by Nellie's exposé. Her startling accounts of the asylum that she was able to describe because of her investigation prompted a new form of reporting known as stunt reporting, otherwise called investigative journalism, which is still common today. Nellie broke down the barriers of the time that held the idea that journalism was a man's job. As well as aiding to women's rights, she also helped the insane. Medical treatment of the insane would not be as developed today as if it were not for Nellie. Bly's work in exposing the horrors of mental institutions was similar to that of Dorothea Dix, who worked in the mid-1840s. Dix also went undercover in these institutions by working as a teacher, where she had a front-seat view to the inhumane treatments. Dix wrote about everything she saw and presented her case to the legislature of Massachusetts. Similar to Bly, Dix's evidence and exposé shocked audiences and helped bring attention to a very real problem of the 19th century. Both Bly and Dix are considered pioneers in treatment for the mentally insane, and were also activists for the women's suffrage movement, working hard to gain equality in their fields. Just as Bly had followed Dix, many future Americans followed in Bly's footsteps. The Rosenhan experiment was a famous experiment done in order to determine the validity of psychiatric diagnosis, conducted by a Stanford University psychology professor and published in 1973 under the title "On Being Sane in Insane Places." It was likely inspired by Bly's investigation. Nellie's investigation on the conditions in Blackwell's Island Women's Lunatic Asylum earned her acclaim, but she didn't stop there. She followed her exposé with similar investigative work, which included multiple editorials depicting the harsh treatment of individuals in New York jails, corruption in the state legislature, as well as other accounts of misbehavior. In 1889, the World sent her on a trip around the world in a record-setting 72 days, achieving further fame after she safely returned to America and published another book about the experiment, Around the World in 72 Days. Bly took a step away from journalism around the time she married millionaire Robert Seaman and became known as Elizabeth Jane Cochran Seaman. Following Seaman's death in 1905, Bly re-entered journalism and began working for the New York World in 1920. 2 years later, Bly died at 57 from pneumonia on January 27, 1922 in New York City, and was buried at Woodland Lawn Cemetery in the Bronx. "I was too impatient to work at the usual duties assigned women," wrote Bly in 1888. Awareness was heightened of the harsh and often unnecessary treatment of the insane because of Nellie and her exploration and reports of American asylums. She was able to elevate the role of women in American society. The New York Press Club advises an annual Nellie Bly Cover Reporter Award to acknowledge the best journalistic effort by an individual with 3 years or less professional experience in honor of Nellie breaking so many barriers at only the beginning of her career. She addressed social issues that affected all society marginalized minorities and that were in desperate need of attention at the end of the 19th century. Bly successfully pioneered through the male-dominated field of journalism by exploring places many writers wouldn't dare to go and exchanging ideas with the public. Nellie Bly left a lasting legacy for women writers to come.